Tom Pelissero just sent out. Former Dolphins coach Mike McDaniel informed the Browns he's withdrawing from their head coaching search ahead of a scheduled in-person interview Wednesday, per source. McDaniel, who is still a candidate for the Ravens and Raiders head coach vacancy, is interviewing for the Chargers OC job today. He has multiple OC offers and could have a new home soon.
Okay, so obviously not great because now we are down to either Jim Schwartz, essentially. Jesse Minter's obviously in the mix, but it'll basically be Jim Schwartz or a young, unproven, unknown offensive coordinator. It's not great.
Listen, I'm going to say this because I want to give a little bit of deference here.
Yeah.
Do I think that this could be that Mike McDaniel realized he wasn't getting the head coaching job? This is very prominent. You realize you're not getting the head coaching job, so you pull out of it before. So it makes you look a little bit better in this process. Well, we got the guy we're going to talk to right now, Albert Breer of the MMQB on the Make It Right, Call Kyle Wright hotline. Albert, welcome to the show, buddy.
You guys are aware of what Mike McDaniel was a part of in Cleveland like 12 years ago, right?
Yeah. You're saying this weighed heavily in that?
I mean, what was it, like a 32-point plan or something like that? What was that? Like him and Kyle.
It's the PowerPoint presentation that he made. Shanahan made him come up with and create.
Right, like the get me the hell out of here manifesto, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like I think this is an interesting decision by him. I think maybe there is some feeling that you aren't getting the job. He's also, I think, right in the thick of a number of these, and I mean, to me, like I think the one he probably winds up in is Tampa, and it could be like too, like that. You know, he isn't getting the job, and you know he wants to focus on a couple of the other ones. You know, sometimes, and I think that we've gotten to the point with these two where there are so many Zooms being done, and so many of these guys are being kind of like run through the ringer, and it's like, I mean, if you're doing 50 of them, you know what I mean, like. And that's a ridiculous number, but like if you've been doing these nonstop for a couple of weeks, and you have a feeling that maybe you're not in the driver's seat for one of them, I mean, you can always go to the team and say like, look, just level with me. If I'm not getting this, like, why don't we not waste each other's time? I've definitely heard of those sorts of scenarios playing out. Not that it did here, but I've heard of those sorts of scenarios playing out in the past as well.
All right, Albert. So there were 6 people getting a second interview for this job. That now brings us down to 5. Grant Udinski, Nate Scheelhaase, Todd Monken, Jim Schwartz, and Jesse Minter. What do we make of these 5 guys? And do you think that there's a front runner in the clubhouse right now?
Well, so Monken is there today. I believe, I don't have it in front of me, but I believe McDaniel was tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
I think Minter was Thursday, and then Udinski Friday, and obviously they can't talk to Scheelhaase until after the championship games, and what form they can talk to him obviously is going to be dictated by whether or not the Rams can win. I actually think, you know, it's interesting because I think for a lot of teams, the second round of interviews has become sort of a coronation, and there's been this big race to get to a few of the candidates, right? So I think the guys who are in that category would be obviously John Harbaugh, Kevin Stefanski, Jeff Hafley, who interviewed really well in a number of different places. Jesse Minter's close to being in that category because he did really well and interviewed with every team that had an opening. And then Robert Salah, had a little traction with a couple of teams, and I think it helped push the process along with Tennessee. It just feels like to me, the Browns are, to their credit, not getting caught up in all of that. Let's see if we can run our own process, and let's see, what this looks like going through it, and find some people we like. And I think some people would look at it and say, well, don't you want to compete? But I also think it's the way that Baltimore and Pittsburgh are handling their business as well, where it's like you go through a full process and you see if you can find somebody that maybe fits you better than anybody else. So, look, obviously I like the guys they're bringing back for second interviews. I would say Minter has interviewed really well wherever he's been. He's a little green. I think Udinski looks like going to be a really good head coach someday, but he's very green. he still has a ways to go in a number of different areas. So it'd be a risk from that standpoint going in on him. Scheelhaase, same thing, really green, but he has head coach qualities. And then, obviously like McDaniel and Munkin is a little bit of the older name. So you've got a variety of candidates. And then you have Schwartz, who I think, in a lot of ways, like the two coordinators that I thought coming into this process among the 10 teams, where it was like the team basically had more or less sent the signal, like, we want to keep this guy. And maybe he's the head coach, maybe he's not, but we want to keep this guy. One will be Jeff Ulbrich in Atlanta, and Kevin Stefanski retained him there. And the other is just Schwartz. And so, like, do you envision Jim Schwartz being your head coach? Do you think he deserves another shot if people maybe missed the boat on him? I think that's certainly possible. I don't think he did a horrible job in Detroit. He took over a dumpster fire, a winless team, got them into the playoffs in 3 years. And then, I think the roster construction, some of the risks they took on guys, like they took some guys that they got questionable on off-field stuff, wound up costing him, but it wasn't all bad in Detroit. And so I think Schwartz is a very real consideration there.
All right, including the Browns in this, how does Shawn McDermott, how does he shake up any of the coaching searches that we've discussed?
Well, I think, so Tennessee really thought about it yesterday before they wind up making their move for McDermott. And that was a consideration for them. I think Arizona will really consider Shawn McDermott. Vegas, I think, could kick the tires. Tom Brady was in the division with McDermott. And Cleveland's interesting because if you guys remember, I think it was 2016, right? Paul DePodesta, correct me if I'm wrong, was very high on Shawn McDermott, right?
That's
when
correct.
They hired Hugh Jackson.
Yeah.
And so, I think sometimes owners hang on to those things, So, Shawn McDermott's a very strong head coach, knows how to build a program. And I think for someone, Shawn McDermott is a credibility hire, right? Like if you feel like you're lacking in that department and you need to just kind of get your program up to level ground and you're in a position where it's like, okay, like we need to show everybody that this is a real professional outfit that's going to be working to compete at the highest level. I think Shawn McDermott can be a really good hire for you. Staffing would be a question with him, of course, like who's he bringing with him? That's going to be a question. And then, the plan for the quarterback, which I would say the Browns right now are sort of one of these clean slate situations where, it doesn't look like the best one on paper, but if you aren't wild about Jackson Dart or Cam Ward or Michael Penix, like you could look at that one, look at the Browns and say, okay, like at least I have a chance to kind of make this what I will of it. So, there could be a match there. I think it's at least interesting. And in the past history, the fact that the Browns were in on McDermott before he even got to Buffalo adds a layer to that.
Albert, obviously Robert Salah getting the head coach job in Tennessee. It was interesting to watch that process play out. What's been the reaction around NFL types on Salah getting a second chance this quickly after what happened in New York?
He's really popular in NFL circles. That's the first thing you need to know. Like, he's very well liked. And so I think first and foremost, there are a lot of people who are really happy for him. And I think there's a curiosity, too, because I think for the longest time, there was a feeling that he had everything it would take to be a great head coach. And, you can see what Kyle Shanahan is one of the most respected coaches in football, thinks of him, not just in taking the chance on him in 2017, right? When he was a fired linebackers coach, Kyle Shanahan felt strongly enough to make him his first defensive coordinator in San Francisco and then to bring him back again this year, So I think there's like a real curiosity over what that's going to look like in Tennessee now with what might be a little bit more of a stable situation if they can give him a little bit of runway. Because if you really drill down on a look in New York, I'd say they did a pretty good job drafting and developing and building a roster. And if you look, you'll see 2021 was kind of the teardown year. 22, they're rebuilding it. And then 23 was when Rodgers came in, and you looked at their roster and like, man, these guys are ready to compete. And then Rodgers gets hurt on the first series of the season, and they still compete through the rest of the year. He's able to do enough to keep his job. And even when he got fired, like 5 games in that second year, I think they were 2-3, and they had a murderous beginning of the schedule, and the owner just got antsy and fired him. So, like, I think there's still, despite the overall record, I think there's still a lot of unknown on Robert Salah. And, I think he's going to be able to put together a pretty good staff. I think there'd be a chance Mike McDaniel would go with him if a couple other things fall through. Brian Daboll is a possibility there. Cliff Kingsbury's a possibility there. And I think he's had time to think about all this, and I think he's going to wind up being a lot better the second time for the experience he had the first time around.
Albert, do you have any extra background on Kevin Stefanski landing with the Falcons?
What are you looking for? I can tell you anything you need to know.
Anything I need to know? Does he regret not waiting until the Bills job opened up?
Oh, that's actually a great question. So I don't know the answer to that. What I would say on this is, like, I do think this is like one of those where connections help, and where I think it's just sort of, for him at least, I think it was about finding fit, and like coming from Cleveland, I think the idea of going to a place where it'd be like a calmer environment and he'd be insulated a little bit and he could just coach football was important to him. And, I think Atlanta will afford him the chance to do that. Like, it's an interesting structure they're going to have there with Matt Ryan, where you've got, the owner obviously over the top, but their whole idea in bringing in Matt Ryan was that they needed to create more accountability. And there were sort of too many hands that were fishing around in the football pot there, and it was like, basically, like, let's just find somebody to put over the top that, like, we know that person's in charge and everybody's accountable to that person, and then the people underneath them can just do their jobs, not worrying about answering to 5 different people. And so I think that really appealed to Kevin, like the idea of going to a place that was going to be like that, and where, some of the other things we're going to be taken care of, and he was going to be able to just go and coach football. And hey, look, like, I mean, to you guys' credit, right? Because I think Cleveland's one of the best football markets in America. And I'm not just saying that because I'm on the radio with you guys. Like, I mean, it's a better football market than any of the markets in the Northeast. I'll tell you that. Like, just based on the history of the game and the knowledge of the fans there and everything else. Like, I do think like that, like the intensity of being there, like after you go through that, and what that was and what that meant for Kevin over the last few years, going to a place that might be a little bit calmed down, and where every play isn't going to be dissected, like it's the winning throw of the Super Bowl, probably will be a little bit of a breath of fresh air for him as well.
Albert, as always, you've knocked it out of the park here. We appreciate you, buddy. We'll catch up with you after the conference round next week.
All right, thanks, guys. Sorry for being late this week.
Oh, no worries at all, buddy. Albert Breer there, MMQB on the Make It Right Call Kyle Wright hotline.